Nnormal, Kilian Jornet's company that he started in conjunction with Camper Shoes, is a company and a brand I've not talked about in this channel, but it is one that I will be covering much more in the future because I think they're doing some really interesting things. Now, Nnormal first popped up on my radar with this shoe. This is the Nnormal Kboix. This is the shoe that Kilian won UTMB Chamonix in 2022. And I found this shoe fascinating, but it took me over a year to get a pair. And when I was in the States recently, I finally did get a pair. So there'll be plenty of content about this shoe because there's so much I want to talk about. But this video is not about this shoe. Yesterday, Nnormal released a video, a press release about a new shoe that they're going to release, a modular shoe. And that's really interesting. So this video is going to be a bit of a design deep dive. And for those of you who like my product design and design deep dives, this one's going to really get into the weeds. Now, if you're just a road runner and you're not interested in trail shoes, there's probably still something here, though this will be trail shoe focused primarily. Modular design is usually a thing reserved for undergraduate industrial design portfolios and concept work in practicing designers' portfolios, because it's an interesting design and engineering challenge, but it doesn't often have much practicality in a production environment, because the more modular you make something, the more points of failure, the more cost, the more parts, the more muddled user experience, just the more problems you bring into the system. And when you're trying to productize that to manufacture it, it often, the benefits, far, far, far do not match the costs and the hassles and the problems that you're going to get into. We've seen a lot of modular concepts in consumer products. We've seen some modular cell phones in the past. We've seen some modular computer systems. But again, they often run into massive problems in production and they end up not happening. So the fact that Nnormal is proposing to do a modular running shoe, trail running shoe specifically, is really interesting. But I think the essence of what they're doing and what they're attempting to do is quite interesting and worth talking about. So what Nnormal's actually proposing here, and I think they look like this shoe is in final prototype, so there's actually a real shoe. This isn't just concept work, is a three-piece shoe, which is pretty standard for a running shoe, right? You have an upper, you have a midsole, and you have an outer. Now, what Nnormal is doing here is they're taking the upper and the outer, the outsole, and they're joining them into kind of one unit. Think of a moccasin, actually. I think that's probably the best example. A moccasin is usually one piece of material that joins at the top somehow, wraps around under your foot. That's essentially what they're doing here, and they're creating a large puck midsole or insole that's very thick that you can insert into the shoe. Really interesting concept, because what they're trying to accomplish by doing this is to make a shoe that's customizable to what you want to run on. Now, for example, a race like UTMB, which is an ultra marathon, you're doing over 100-mile race there, you're going to have technical trail, you're going to have flowy trail, you're going to have some road. So to have a shoe that you could theoretically pull out a different midsole that had different properties, and Nnormal is proposing 3 different types of midsole, a soft, a reactive, and a bouncy one. And, the soft foam one is their supercritical EVA. That's the foam that's actually in this shoe, the Kboix. It's this foam. They're also proposing the reactive is supercritical TPU, and then the bounce is supercritical PIBA foam, or the same type of foam that ZoomX is for Nike. Now, that's really interesting because, again, back to that ultra race where you're running across a lot of different environments, if you're on that road course, you may want that PIVA reactive bouncy thing. If you're on a technical piece of trail, you may want that softer, more cushioned thing. And if you're on something that's very flowy, you want that reactive piece of foam in there as well. So to have a single shoe that you could theoretically swap out midsoles or essentially the insole is really interesting. Now, in the video that Nnormal released to kind of show how this shoe works, and I'll put a link in the description to that video, they show Killian out for one of his epic runs, and Killian is known for these sort of multi-day, I'm just going to go off in the mountains for a run and I'll be back in 2 or 3 days sort of runs. Follow his Strava. It's insane sometimes. But anyway, Killian's out there running in a beautiful environment in the mountains. He pulls up, takes his shoe off, and he swaps the midsole, as they showed there, to get a different feel for what he's going for, which, okay, that's really fascinating. Practicality-wise, in the image you can see Killian has the other midsole, in his, back, you could say pack, waist belt, whatever that is. Whether that would be comfortable to run in, who knows? But again, I think it's an interesting idea, and Killian, being the main proponent of it, I think makes it much more viable than I think a lot of other ideas. But this is where I think there are some challenges, because if you have essentially that moccasin shoe with an upper and a outer, a rubber outer, your Vibram outer, and you're essentially just swapping in a very thick insole, which is essentially what this shoe is, that creates a lot of points of failure because, again, how do you guarantee you're going to seat that midsole in that shoe the same way every time? Different materials, the softer one's probably going to be a lot easier to get into that shoe than the PIBA-based one, or if the PIBA-based one had a carbon plate in it, even more so. What if there's grit? What if there's moisture in there? How does that all work? Again, what if the shoe's soaked? There's a lot of problems in wet shoes in road running and trail running of the insoles sort of working their way out of the shoe. Famously, Eliud Kipchoge many years ago had his insoles flying out of his Nike Streaks, in a wet race. So how do you solve for all of this stuff without, really wrecking the feel of the shoe? And this is where expectations for trail running shoes may help this concept, because a 10 to 12 ounce, maybe a little bit more trail running shoe isn't completely unheard of, and that has a lot more viability than, say, in a road running shoe. But again, one of the challenges of creating a modular system beyond the points of failure with all the parts is you need to over-engineer a lot of the parts, which adds weight to the entire thing. So how much would this shoe weigh? Would it be comparable to a heavier trail shoe? And if it's meant to be a race shoe, if this is a shoe Killian's going to go race in, what is the weight of that? Because the thing about the Chirag is this is an extremely lightweight shoe, and Killian talked a lot about how he needed and wanted his race shoe to be ultra lightweight, and this is ultra lightweight. So the Kboix, it's not necessarily going to achieve that out of the box. But what's even more interesting about this concept, beyond just the basic idea of having that sort of one-piece upper outsole and then you're putting in a big midsole, is what Nnormal is showing is 3 types of midsoles, 3 different foams, but they're all the same thickness. But what if you could have different thicknesses in there? Now that's getting really interesting because, for example, in a race like UTMB Chamonix, again, you're running on roads, you're running on flowy, mountain roads, and you're doing a lot of technical ups and downs. So for that more technical stuff, you may want that soft midsole, but you may want it to be a little thinner because you want more ground feel. But if you're doing a long descent, you may want, the more protective, reactive midsole with maybe a moderate amount of stack. And then if you're bounding down a fire road, a beautiful, flowy dirt road, or you're on actual paved road, you may want that super thick PIBA-based foam. Again, that really opens the door to modularity and really tailoring the shoe for each one of those use cases. But it creates a lot of challenges with the upper, because if you look at the upper of this shoe, it is a very traditional upper. It's a laced upper, it looks very traditional. Now, that could pose challenges because if you're having a different stack height in there, that midsole is, different heights, you're going to run into lockdown problems. But there is a solution there. So if you look at road cycling shoes, and this is the Suplest Road Pro. This was, when I was cycling, this was sort of the holy grail to me, the best shoe. This is very representative of how road cycling shoes are built. They essentially have a one-piece upper that wraps around itself with the BOA lacing system, which is that wheeled system with a wire. So it allows the two pieces of material to sort of loop around each other. And theoretically, that BOA system with that one-piece upper could allow the upper to kind of, collapse in on itself and give you that lockdown. The toe box would still be a bit of a challenge because that's sort of a molded piece of the shoe. But again, with an ultra shoe or a trail running shoe, to have more generous toe box volume probably isn't the worst thing in the world. But that BOA system, that one piece upper, that would allow it. But essentially, this is where Speedland is with one of their shoes, the SL HSV. Horrible name, but this is essentially kind of what Speedland's doing. Different shoe. They don't have the modularity of what Nnormal's trying to do here, but they have the BOA system. They have an upper that wraps around the foot and can kind of, take out some of the slack. They have a customizable outer, meaning you cut away parts of it that you don't want. So it's a one and done customization. It's not a continuing customization. But Speedland's sort of already there. Now, this brings in the other problem that this shoe is going to run into, which is the price. This Speedland shoe is $375. We're over in road running freaking out about $300 shoes or a $500, high-end performance racer in the Adidas Evo 1 meant for elites or like top-level pros. This type of shoe, this type of modular construction shoe that would have all these different technologies in it, $500 would be extremely cheap. And frankly, in road cycling shoes are pushing about $1,000 for the really high-end top-tier shoes. So cost is going to be an issue as well for this Nnormal shoe. One of the other missions that Nnormal is going for as a company is sustainability and durability. They're trying to make products that are durable and that will have a very long shelf life and use life so that you're buying less shoes, you're buying less material, you're wasting less materials. And Kilian was very vocal in 2022 on the pair of Shirags that he raced UTMB in, that he basically trained and raced most of 2022 in one pair of these. So by the time he lined up on the start line at UTMB in 2022, he had about 600 or 700 kilometers in the pair of Shirags that he was racing in that day. So Nnormal is really trying to make very durable shoes that are also built in design where you can replace things. Like, for example, you can replace the outsole on this shoe fairly straightforwardly if you go to a Vibram center. So it's something that can be replaced. And this is something that Nnormal is trying to solve for with the Kboix, is trying to make a shoe that is very durable, but it is got a longer sort of shelf life and use life out of it because you can replace the parts that wear while the parts that don't wear as fast are probably still fine. So in a running shoe, your upper may be fine. You may have worn the rubber off the outsole, and then the foam is going to pack out. So that's what the Kboix is trying to solve for, where you could, swap out the foam, and have a fresher shoe and not have to buy a whole new shoe. Interesting concept, and that is, again, part of Nnormal's mission. So I think what Nnormal is doing with the Kboix is a really good, interesting idea. Now, they are calling for 150 people to join the testing team to really kind of put this shoe through its paces. I put my name in the hat for that one. I did the sign-up form. They seem to be looking for people with large Instagram followings, which is weird, but okay. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, but I think it would be really interesting to test this shoe. But what if you took the modular concept and you pushed it further? So if we go back to road cycling shoes, if you look at a road cycling shoe, essentially what you have is a very simple upper. And whether there's the BOA system or it's a laced upper, it's a very simple upper that's on a very stiff platform. And I'm calling that platform because road cycling shoes don't really have a midsole or an outsole. Of course there's an insole, of course there's something on the bottom of the shoe, but what that is a very stiff piece of material because you want pedaling efficiency. And usually that stiff piece of material has a bunch of holes in it for cleats because a road cycling shoe is cleating, clipping into the pedal on the bike. So what if you took that concept and you took what Nnormal is proposing and what Speedland's already doing and you pushed it even farther? You essentially take a road cycling shoe, figure out a way to make that, outer midsole, insole a little less stiff, or maybe as stiff if it's a road shoe, and figure out a way to secure the midsole foam with different outers to the bottom of the shoe through the sort of screw system that cleats use in road shoes. Now you could have a single upper. You could swap out all sorts of different stack heights of midsoles, because now it's not in the shoe, it's attached to the bottom of the shoe. And you could also put whatever outsole you want on that. Now, that's honestly probably too much modularity, because you're always going to be able to solve those problems with multiple shoes much better. And if you're building very durable shoes, then those shoes are going to last longer for that more durable shelf life. So you're going to get more use over the course of using all of those shoes, even with multiple shoes. But it's still an interesting concept. And these are the kind of things that product designers and engineers really love to kind of try, because it does feel innovative, but it also, even if the product doesn't ever really work out, you're going to learn a ton about construction and how to make a shoe better. And I feel like maybe that is what Nnormal ultimately is trying to do with the Kboix, is trying to really rethink how the shoe's made. And again, they've stated that that is their mission as a company. They want to rethink how shoes, not just running shoes, shoes are made. And this really feels like that first step for them. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. This is the type of design deep dive that I do on running shoes, so if you find this interesting, subscribe. You'll see more content like this pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.